Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an extraordinary episode of Living Theosophy. We have a very special guest with us tonight. He was born in India and educated at the universities of London, Sussex, and Oxford. Dr. Edi Bilimoria presents an unusual blend of experience in the field of science, art, and philosophy. In science and engineering, Edi has worked as a consultant at the petrochemical, oil and gas, aerospace, transport, and construction industries. He's been a project manager and head of design for major innovative projects such as the Channel Tunnel, London Underground Systems, and offshore installations. A student of the perennial philosophy for over 4 decades, Edi has given courses and lectured extensively in the UK and internationally in California, the Netherlands, India, and Australia. He has organized and chaired several major conferences, and his written work has been published extensively in the fields of science, engineering, and the esoteric philosophy. He worked as an education manager from 2009 to 2011 for the Theosophical Society in Australia, developing study courses and study papers and researching, lecturing, and organizing international conferences. Additionally, he supervised the Campbell Theosophical Research Library, the National Media Library, and the National Members Lending Library. He's also been a glider pilot, which I find very exciting. And he's a singer. He's a very good singer and an extraordinary pianist. And he practices regularly on what you see behind him there, his cherished mahogany Steinway grand piano. And his published works are The Snake and the Rope, Problems in Western Science Resolved by Occult Science, and Mirages in Western Science Resolved by Occult Science. And there's a brand new book, a magnum opus, if you will, over 1,000 pages, many years in the making, that will be published on October 31st, which, by the way, is Edi's birthday. He's a Halloween baby. It's coming out, and it is a Consciousness Unfolding. There's 3 volumes, actually 4, if you include the glossary. 3 volumes, Consciousness Unfolding, A Journey Through Consciousness. Now, Edi is one of my absolute favorites. He is gentle, compassionate, with a powerful presence, and the most beautiful of hearts. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one and only Dr. Edi Bilimoria.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Edi, for being here. There's so much to talk about, and you covered so much in your short life here on Earth. I don't know how you packed in all of that, but you have, and you keep going.
There's a little secret, Anne.
What is it?
I've never had a television.
Oh, I love that. Never?
And not for being perverse, but I've never found the need for it. And it saves a lot of time. And also recently, I've not touched social media other than very judiciously and very sparsely, because one can spend a lot of time on social media and websites. And I'm not knocking it. It's very important for some people, and for people in marketing and PR, it is absolutely vital. But it's not my way of, let's say, communicating. I'd much rather do it the way we are. And so thank you ever so much for this invitation, which I really sincerely appreciate.
Oh, we're so grateful to have you. We're so grateful to have you. You've got a lot of irons in the fire. I wanted to start off with this book. That was what you're working on when we spoke a few months back. And now it is at the publishers, ready to go again for a launch. October 31st, ladies and gentlemen, it will be available at all major bookstores like Watkins and online as well at retailers. And it is a huge, and it really encapsulates like a lifetime of, this has been many years. How many years have you been working on consciousness?
It's been a 20-year pregnancy, let's say. But the hard labor was, the very hard labor was the last 7 years.
Yes, I know. And finally, 2021, it's finally coming to fruition. I've been watching some of your presentations online, the way you talk about science. We talk about theosophy on here, and a lot of it is elementary theosophy on this channel. We simply say it's ancient divine science and divine knowledge. But the way that you're able to go into this subject about this occult science, what you're talking about. I would love for you to give us an overview, if you will. I know you've got some things here about in volume 1, talking about science contrasted with the perennial philosophy on the consciousness and man. And we do cover a little bit of that here about, all is mind, and this divine consciousness that created everything is also within us. Would you care to expand on that in your own words, please, Edi?
Well, yes, let's just remember that the founding impulse behind the Theosophical Society was, in the beautiful words of the Mahachohan, that to show us where the white dove of truth may rest her weary foot, because between brutal materialism and religious superstition, the poor white dove doesn't know where to put her poor weary foot. And the most important point there is stressed by the Mahatmas is the Theosophical Society is not a hall of occultism, as they put it. What they wanted was a really practical regenerating brotherhood. Whether that has happened or not is a very moot point. But they explained very clearly that Theosophy, the real meaning is Theosophia, very simply, divine wisdom, wisdom of the gods, always the gods in plural, not the wisdom of God. And I see the impulse as showing that all the various sciences, religions, and philosophies, all these various streams, when taken back to their source, have emanated from one divine fountain, so to speak. And that fountain, that internal spark of divinity, is in each one of us.
It's beautiful. It's just the way that it's explained. This is so necessary, I believe, right now for folks to understand this. It is a unifying, beautiful way of understanding who we are, why we are, where we are, what we are. Thank you. Thank you. So this, going through the book, as you go further into the book, about the consciousness of man, how would you describe, for those who are just coming across this channel, people are thinking consciousness, and I don't want to veer too far off of the book, but about the mind. A lot of people think it's the brain and that it's simply here in the 5 senses, but this consciousness that is eternal, forever, boundless, and connects all. Could you explain that in layman's terms, this consciousness that you just spoke about?
Yes, let's think of music as a very good example. Music needs an instrument, it needs an orchestra, but it is not the same as the instrument and the orchestra. Without the instrument, the music is only potential. It needs a violinist or pianist to make it physical and tangible in our world, in our 3-dimensional world of 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time. So the brain is the instrument and the vehicle of consciousness, not the generator of consciousness. And I feel that if people took more notice of great poetry and mythology, a lot of the arguing and a lot of the left brain chattering and yattering would be quietened down. And here I can think of no better short aphorism, I suppose, than the one quoted by the great William James in his lectures on human immortality, when he quoted from Shelley saying, "Life, like a dome of stained glass, stains the white radiance of eternity." In other words, our brains, they color like glass the white radiance of eternity. And let's just think of consciousness as that universal energetic intelligence the white radiance of eternity, which is specialized through our brains, acting like the refractive index of glass. So the huge debate in science now is whether the brain generates consciousness or whether consciousness is, so to speak, the ghost in the machine. And the wonderful work and scientific work done on near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, the scrupulous care with which the data and the research has been sifted shows unequivocally that consciousness extends beyond the brain. And the brain is only its instrument, in the same way as if you turn off your television, the tiger in your television has not disappeared. The means of converting the signals from the broadcasting station to your apparatus, that has been extinguished, but not the source. So you cannot define consciousness, that's the trouble, any more than you can define music, any more than you can define love. You certainly experience it, but to define it is to put it in a cage of words.
Your analogies are absolutely off the charts and so very accurate. That helps us to understand the near-death experiences, as you mentioned. That's one of my favorite subjects, because as they come back and we look at the commonalities of these experiences, they seem to almost be verbatim these ancient teachings of love and compassion and unity, and all that these ageless wisdoms and principles have told us. They seem to come back with that information downloaded from crossing over and out of the body. So the near-death experiences, I was really excited to see that you mentioned that. The insights from NDEs and OBEs, OBE being an out-of-body experience where it isn't a death, and NDE being a near-death experience where the body actually does pass away. What are your understandings? I've seen you talk about Dr. Eben Alexander, again, a neurosurgeon who, without doubt, he was completely skeptic until it happened to him. What are your experiences or your understanding? And did you research these to look at this consciousness, where it is in the body and all that when you were doing your work?
I had the great privilege of meeting and speaking at length with Eben Alexander.
Oh,
and
did you?
And I'm corresponding with him. So when you say, did you research? Oh, my gosh, yes, I did do a fair bit of research. There are over 2,000 references in the complete work.
Oh my God.
Not on NDEs, of course, but a fair proportion concerns NDEs. The most important, or two important points to stress, is the commonality of the experience.
Yes.
And the genuineness of the experience. Now, the genuineness is shown by the radical change in outlook after the NDE compared to before the NDE. Just one example, Rajiv Bhatia, he was a very successful consultant cardio anesthesiologist in America, highly ambitious, quite ruthless in his own words with his family, a large mansion, big house, and all the rest of it. After his experience, he completely changed when he saw the true reality from the other side of the curtain. And there are many experiences and there are many accounts like that. So it is the radical change in outlook of the person who's come out of the NDE that demonstrate and proves the point far better than any brain research or neuroresearch could possibly do. Ibn Alexander quite openly was of the opinion that the brain generates consciousness. And now in his book, he mentions that if he had to bring everything down to just one word, it would be love.
Oh.
And he openly says that that neuroscience just has not done its homework. It
Oh,
just
wow.
goes round and round the same squirrel cage.
Well, surely science is catching up now. We're in 2021. Science does seem to be catching up with these ancient teachings of what we want to call spirituality, but the divine
Yeah,
wisdom.
right.
Yeah?
It is. It is, Anne, but I see quite a bifurcation in science. There is the most enlightened science, and a lot of those scientists have contributed wonderfully to the scientific and medical network. And there is the very, very dark face of science, which
Hmm.
really
Tell
has to
me.
be recognized in no uncertain terms. So the enlightened science, they are philosophers, physicists, journalists, all coming together. And there is the manifesto for post-materialist science, and there's wonderful work going on there. But the mainstream have not yet taken any notice of that, in my opinion.
Do you believe we're headed in that direction, though? Do you see it in a way merging or working together?
Um, no, not in the short term,
Mm.
because science is so wrapped up with technology.
Hmm.
When you hear that, for example, Elon Musk was very proudly telling the world that a chip planted in a monkey's brain allows the monkey to play what he calls mind pong, ping pong with his mind pong. Um, the whole attitude is one of increasing technological implants and genetic modifications for what science regards as enhanced human qualities.
Mm.
So the current movement in science towards transhumanism and cryonics, I think, is a
Mm.
very dark and
Hmm.
very dangerous path that science is following. Of course, there is always the enlightening work done by wonderful scientists who are showing the beauties of science, but the mainstream, I can assure you, is driven by the mechanistic model.
It's interesting that they'd want to have anything to do with remaining on Earth to extend life here
Yeah, yeah,
in the world of the five senses. I don't understand that. Surely
right.
they're getting to the point where we can see beyond this world, are they not?
Mm. No, they're not, because they
Ah,
completely equate life with the physical body.
yeah, still.
And so, for example, Ted Williams, the baseball star, I think, um, has frozen his head and his body separately.
Oh, for gosh sakes.
No, literally, in the hope that when science advances,
Ah,
they can be reunited. And the sad thing, is that the greatest of scientists, Einstein, of course,
yes,
Wolfgang Pauli, Heisenberg,
yes.
Erwin Schrödinger, Karl Popper, they all unequivocally stated that science has transcended materialism. And
Mm,
this obsession with extending the material life is what
mm.
Sir Karl Popper would have called promissory materialism. It's materialism promising in the future, but it won't promise. It won't deliver on the promise, far from it.
Well, it seems they want to go out into space in a way to, I'm thinking there's so much work that needs to be done here. There's so
Yeah,
much
yeah.
suffering here on Earth. We must take care of each other and this planet. And if we were to apply what it is that's in your book, in the ancient texts, and actually become these teachings,
Mm,
we can then work to solving all of these problems, not just self-enlightenment,
yeah,
but solving the problems that are here on our planet and understanding there's so much more. As you being
sure,
a
sure.
theosophist for as long
Mm,
as you've been a theosophist,
mm,
please tell the viewers what it is that we're looking at. These ancient teachings are not just something where you can sit around in a cave and then be, I don't know, enlightened and then graduate. You never graduate. There's work to be done. Tell them, what are your thoughts about these teachings, these sacred, ancient divine science? Why do we need this now? Why is it imperative that it comes in now?
Well, it is imperative in any age, of course, but even more so now. because the perennial wisdom or the ancient wisdom has provided us with a culture of the mind such that by intelligently following those precepts, the problems of any age can be solved. Now, that is not saying that the ancient wisdom, and ancient means eternal, let's be clear, it's not just far back. Ancient means eternal, even now. Saying, of course, that the ancient wisdom has solved the problems of any age. Of course not, the detail of it, but it has given us a culture of the mind such that applied intelligently, it tells us that where reason and rational thought exist, irrationality and confusion cannot take place. So the few precepts, highly simple actually, and as profound as they are simple, are the blueprint, not only for our lives, but for all lives.
Mhm.
And of course, the first one is the unity of all existence, and the word unity is so overused,
Yes.
but not unity in the sense of an orchestra or a cricket team or a football team are united. Much more than that, it's as if or as is the entire earth, the entire universe is like one living organism. It is one creature, and it is something that the legendary Isaac Newton wrote actually in his alchemical papers when he said, "This earth is like an animal." He spelled animal with two L's in those days, breathing in the ethereal atmosphere and exuding. So the greatest of minds of all pointed to the unity of life, that if you hurt someone, ultimately you're the one who's going to suffer.
Mhm.
And equally, if you help someone else, you are helped in unseen ways that you may not even recognize.
Oh, it's so comforting to hear that. And the law
Mm.
of equilibrium that we talk about, that you just mentioned, karma and reincarnation and all of that. I think unity sees us standing together hand in hand as individual units. What you're
Yeah,
talking about is we literally are everything else.
yeah,
We are
yeah,
one
that's right.
thing.
Karma does not figure in scientific thought because science is supposed to have nothing to do with ethics. That's
Mm,
not written into its code.
mm.
I mean, I'm not
I,
saying scientists aren't ethical. I'm not saying
yes.
that. But, karma doesn't figure. And also, the other thing that barely figures is the tremendous Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. The second
Mhm.
part is said, that goes on to say, nothing is above, nothing is below in the divine economy, so everything matters.
Right, right, right. Yes. So it's so
Everything matters.
comforting.
Yeah.
As you speak, it
Mm,
feels like just my heart, I just get a chance to feel hope, and I feel just hope for humanity, hope for the
mm,
future. And it isn't just for my own evolution. I'm just
mm,
simply here to be a part of it because we're
mm,
all a part of this. And if we
mm,
work on ourselves, we can help raise that consciousness. And as
mm.
you're talking about, this is you've written 1,000 pages on consciousness, and this is a great time to ask you this. Who and where is the consciousness originating from? For example, the I that is me talking to you.
Mm.
You covered this a little bit ago, but I wanted to pinpoint this because this is a question that I get. And I mean, I'm just a student. I'm just
Mhm.
studying and sharing my experience.
Mm,
The witness, the watcher, the one who is observing this
mm.
body's movements and this body's thoughts. Where is that watcher? Is that the absolute that we speak about in the Theosophical teachings? How would you describe where this origin of consciousness is?
Yeah, that's a interesting and a difficult one. And I would say that every thought, every imagination we have ultimately can be traced back to the unmanifest, to the
Hmm.
universal mind. So the origin, and I don't quite like the word origin because that implies that there was nothing beforehand. But
Right.
anyway, the fountainhead, the ocean origin, is definitely, in my view, the universal mind,
Mm.
which is why all our thoughts are so charged with our own feelings, however crazy, however wonderful our thoughts may be. We hold them so dearly because they carry that charge right from the universal mind.
Well, there is something that we talk about on this channel often, which is the power of thought, and that
Yeah.
thoughts are living forces, choose them wisely, and that also they have the ability to shape our
Mm,
worlds. I
mm,
wanted to get your opinion on, because a lot of people will dismiss that and say imagination is just airy fairy metaphysical stuff, dismiss it. But I believe even Einstein says imagination, circles the world. Thoughts and knowledge, they're in a box, or what does he say? They're limited. But
mm.
imagination, what are your thoughts on thoughts and
Imagination,
imagination?
imagination is crucial, but we
Yes.
have to use it wisely, of course. Um,
Yes.
there is this highly elusive doctrine of Maya, the appearances, the the visages that the divine throws on us and ensnares us. But without imagination, there could be no creative effort. And you're right, Einstein said, if you want your children to be intelligent, read them fairy stories. If you want them to be more intelligent, read them more fairy stories. There's far too much emphasis on the logical left
Mhm.
brain linear mode of thought, whereas
Yeah.
creativity um, involves leaping from one dimension to another, and this is where
Yes.
imagination comes in.
Oh,
So,
I'm sorry to interrupt you. That right there
yeah.
is such a pivotal. I know this is your place of expertise.
Mm,
When you mention imagination and jumping from one dimension to another, a
mm,
lot of people will dismiss that
mm,
again as that's impossible. That doesn't happen. But there are many dimensions, many possibilities,
mm,
endless
mm.
possibilities, and the imagination is something that we need to pay attention to. Once we take control of that, those are the powers latent in humanity. If we can start to access this, can you expand some more on those dimensions, please? Sorry to interrupt
Well,
you.
yeah, no, it's all right. The powers latent in man, one of them is certainly the power of imagination and the power of
Mm.
using it. But
Yes,
the Sanskrit word is Kriya Shakti, of course,
yes,
so
yes.
but the huge problem with that is confusing your own imagination with what you think you see. So the discipline of the trained scientist and the trained occultist is to distinguish between the image making content of his own mind and what he actually sees in the so-called outside world. But you're really talking there often energy substance, which can be trained and which can be used for, well, good or obviously evil purposes.
Yes, yes. Kriya Shakti can be used for like black magic, or it can be
Oh,
used
yeah,
to perhaps help
yeah.
all people on earth, not just for monetary gain for self, but
Mm,
for good for
mm,
all. And this is something that a lot of people are interested in now. That's what they're coming in for. They want to learn how to use this. And
yes, yeah.
what are your understandings on, like you mentioned something about a seed being planted in the soil, this, whatever you plant in the subconscious, and subconscious and conscious. Does your subconscious really, and I'm going to ask you this question, does your subconscious really accept it as fact? Like if you're listening during that time, what they call, hang on one second. Oh, I can't remember the word. Dang it, dang it, dang it. I have forgotten it. It's that time in between sleep and waking. There's a word for it,
Or
and I've
between
completely
sleep
forgotten.
and waking, the
Hypnagogia.
no,
Hypnagogia?
hypnagogic is between waking and
Yes,
sleeping, and the other one's
yes.
hypnopompic.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Can
yeah.
you tell me what are your thoughts about this creative Kriya Shakti during that time between the worlds, and the abilities that humans have to be able to create or co-create our worlds and make them a better place, make this a better place, less suffering?
Well, the nice thing about hypnagogic or the hypnopompic state is the brain mind doesn't interfere with you, so you are free in your imagination. But um, difficulty and the training comes in tethering what are the gossamer threads of finest thought in a stiffer mold of concrete thought, if I can put it that way. So the finer the imagination, the more attentive you've got to be to it.
Mm.
And our world and our society does everything to distract us. But you touched on something a little earlier. I mentioned the Mahachohan's sort of message or mission for the TS, that between brutal materialism and religious superstition, the white dove of truth doesn't know where to place her feet. Now, I would say between brutal materialism and scientific superstition, otherwise known as scientism, the white dove of truth doesn't know where to put her foot.
Mm.
So scientism has nothing to do with the spirit of science. It is, I'd almost call it a pseudo-religious movement within science, where
Really?
materialism has become a church in its own rights. I've got a section in volume 1 literally called the Church of Scientism, and I've gone through the various syndromes that are used to justify and prop up a materialistic position where it just holds no water. One example is Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb. David Bohm, the great, humble, wonderful physicist, of course, great friend of Krishnamurti and professor at Birkbeck College. When his mathematics could not be countered, this is going back a long way, Los Alamos, Oppenheimer issued an edict: if we cannot disprove David Bohm, we must ignore him.
Mm.
Well, that pervades a lot of scientific discovery. If we cannot disprove out-of-body experiences and the extension of consciousness, we must ignore it. And
Mm.
parapsychology is a huge subject, which is an excellent bridge between matter and mind, so to speak.
Mhm.
I can assure you, anyone embarking on a career in parapsychology, and even a well-known psychologist who chooses that path, may well find his career in ruins. The parapsychology is a good bridge between matter and mind, and the other one, of course, is quantum physics.
Yes, quantum physics. That's what we were talking about, the different realities, dimensions. You mentioned it, dimensions, and this pure potential of an infinite number of dimensions. And you mentioned that imagination is the path there. I was wondering if you would explain about the dimensions that are existing in this current time now. Could you flesh that out with our consciousness being able to not just be in this three-dimensional world, but there's other three-dimensional worlds that exist at the same time?
Well,
Am I correct?
the beauty of consciousness is it can access as many dimensions as it wants to, depending on your own training, of course, and depending on your own powers. If you sincerely believe that all of existence is only 3 dimensions of space and one of time, that's as far as your imagination will take you. But if you don't, and I'm sure even those who profess to believe that, I'm sure they have dreams, and surely dreams show
Yes.
that there is
Yeah.
another dimension. And in science, string theory and M theory, theoretically at least, point to many dimensions over and above the 3 dimensions of space and one of time.
Is it true that everything is happening at the same time from your understanding of consciousness, where we here on Earth have time and what we think is a linear thing, but in the near-death experiences, sometimes they come back and they explain this very...
Yeah, in the near-death experience, the almost universal message coming through is a non-duality, is that you are one with all. There is no separation. So the consciousness becomes non-dual in the near-death experience. And the best example of that is the great Heisenberg, when he was dying, but fully in control of his mental faculties, as you would expect from a Nobel physicist. He said to his pupil, von Weizsäcker, "It is very simple, I never knew this. Physics is of no importance. I know that the world is now mind."
Because that's what the teachings say. All of them say it
Yeah.
is mind, and this is that it is mind. So when it is, I'm trying to explain this to those who are not familiar with it, and I only know what I know, which is very little. How do we explain, how do we say this? That the consciousness that created everything, the consciousness that is inside of us being the same, everything is mind. People will then say, well, how are those trees mind? How is the stars mind? How is the ever expanding universe mind? Explain that to me, Anne. And I'm like, well, the conscious, go ahead. Can you explain that for us?
The key is mind because, I suppose, how can I put it? Because there is an intelligence, not a brain intelligence, a higher form and a different form of intelligence that resulted in the tree being a tree and that you being you. The trouble with matter and mind is mind expresses not in matter, but as matter. And there's a huge difference. Mind expresses as matter. So matter is the envelope, the skin, the outer surface of layers of mind, but there is no intrinsic mind and matter dichotomy.
Oh, that's so beautifully said. Thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you for that. That is just the way that you're able to explain it. Thank you so much. Folks coming in here on the Living Theosophy channel, just looking to try to understand that all is mind. Even in the Kabbalion, when they say everything is mind and that everything is conscious, though it is all moving, sometimes at slower degrees than others, this is all the same thing. And
but using our music analogy, mind needs instruments. So the universal consciousness needs agencies to enhance its potentiality. And in the Christian tradition, the archangels and cherubim and, all the lower minor gods. In Sanskrit, you got the Anshohans and the elementals and the nature spirits. These are all the agencies that actuate the divine mind, so to speak. So it's not just all mind and nothing else. It's mind working through its own agencies to produce and actuate physical beings on Earth and elsewhere. And the great Nobel physicist Brian Josephson put it very well that physics needs agents. That's an extraordinary thing for a scientist to say. Physics needs agents. So the laws of physics, the laws of nature, are not blind mechanical laws. They are living powers that are actuated by living intelligent agencies and semi-intelligent agencies.
so
You've
beautiful.
simply got to think of life forms that are not just physical,
Yes.
that inhabit various dimensions and various planes, all of which interact with ourselves. And what the brain does is it filters those energies that we cannot handle and lets through those energies we can.
Do you believe that humans still see the brain, a majority of humans on this planet right now, 2021, the month is July? Do you believe that a majority of the humans think that the brain is a receiver or a sender or both? Are they still looking at it as...
I would say the majority of people see the brain as a generator and a producer. There is no finer, easily read and beautifully written document on that, I suppose 5 pages, than by the great William James, where he points to what he calls the great psychological error of his time. And William James was a contemporary of Blavatsky, incidentally, and a member of the Theosophical Society. And he said the most common error, even in his time, was confusing different functions. The psychological dictum was the brain is a thought is a function of the brain. But what do we mean by function? The first is functional dependence, where you can say steam is a function of the kettle, or electricity is a function of the waterfall turning the turbines round. There is another function which is not generating but releasing. The crossbow does not generate the arrow, it releases the arrow. So that's a permissive function. The third function, which is the most important, is transmissive, the filtering function. So a reducing valve, when it opens and lets the fluid through or whatever, doesn't produce the fluid, it lets more through. So the most creative brain state is the quiet state. The brain threshold, when it is high, is in a state of boredom. That sounds counterproductive and counterintuitive, but the quiet mind, the meditative mind, is the state of mind that lets through the maximum through the valve, so to speak.
That I was just going to ask you, when people are watching this and they're thinking, I'd love to access that consciousness, I'd like to be able to discover more and tap into this. And I was going to ask you, how could they do that? I know meditation is always suggested, but a lot of people say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to do that. I've got to do this, this, and this. Well, but it is imperative. That's where the voice of the silence is it not?
You've only got time for what means something to you. If I want to be a concert pianist and I don't have time to practice, well, bye-bye.
That's a great analogy too.
But what you don't do, in my opinion, is take drugs.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say don't go there. It will cause an expansion of consciousness, but as the universal counsel of the sages is, ultimately, if you carry on taking drugs, the inner deterioration will be inevitable. So the trouble with meditation is people regard it as sitting down and trying not to fidget for half an hour, 1 hour, whatever.
Right.
Meditation takes many forms. Great music, watching a scene, contemplating a great aphorism. It takes many forms. But whatever it does, whatever you do, you've got to shut out the cares of the personal self and try and switch on a divine current, like turning on a lamp.
Yes, beautiful. Do you believe you can meditate with music? I know music is very important to you. And we talked about the Song of the Spheres. This is a universal harmony. Music has been in your life since you were really little. You practice every day, several times a day on your beautiful grand piano back there. Can you explain how one would meditate? If people say, I can't be quiet that long, I can't quiet the thoughts, I understand. There's lots of different ways to do it. There's not just one size fits all. Can you explain how music could be used for meditation for those who wish to access the higher consciousness?
That depends on your own musical proclivities. I mean, whether you're drawn to Western music or Eastern music, and the Eastern classical music is highly meditative for those who are, so to speak, made that way. One of my great regrets is, as I'm totally, I mean, it's like duck to water, the Eastern wisdom and Sanskrit and all of that. I've never taken to Eastern classical music. I mean, I'm very happy to listen to it, but it doesn't do what Western classical music does to me. So firstly, you have to know your own musical resonances, what resonates with you. But then after the music, it's very important to tune into the silence after the music. That is where the real music comes from, the silence. Yeah, and if you chart the works of the great composers right through their lives, the silences increased in length compared to the sounds.
You mean the silence between the notes, correct?
Yeah, the rests.
Yeah, yeah.
Exhaustion.
The rest.
Yeah.
Yes, the rest.
Mm.
Well, without rest, there would be nothing but noise, would there
Yeah,
not?
exactly. So, yeah.
That's so neat. Well, I think it's wonderful that you're able to give us a little bit of instructions on what we can do. Again, we've talked about the voice that's silenced. We've talked about how to silence the chattering of the mind. But there's so much more to you, so much more to you. If you are watching this wondering, oh, I can't do that, I don't know what they're talking about, just listen. It's closer than your own breath. It's
Mm.
true. I wanted to ask, there's several other things I wanted to ask. I see the time is absolutely flying by. I adore you. I am so grateful for the work that you do. You have been of service for many, many, many years. Again, this book, if you're watching, I'll have a link down below as soon as I know where it's going to be available,
Sure.
or I'm just going to put a link so you can look it up. It is called Consciousness Unfolding, A Journey Through Consciousness. There are 3 volumes, actually 4, with the glossary and the all of the stuff that comes with that, the index and everything. So that'll be coming out on October 31st. Edi Bilimoria has other books as well. This is a huge 1,000 pages, and there's no filler, there's no fluff, there's no pictures. Are there pictures?
Plenty of pictures.
Oh, there's plenty of pictures. Oh, okay.
Oh, well, I think, I don't know, a rough count, well over 100, and many tables, explanatory
Oh,
tables,
okay.
and
Good.
also color, and also side notes, all to help readers navigate, because navigating some pretty rough territory is very important.
Yes. Well, okay. So there are pictures. Sorry about that. Over 1,000 pages and 100 pictures.
Well,
Still
not
quite a
pictures,
bit.
diagrams, if you like, diagrams.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. So this is very helpful. Remember, there will be 3 volumes out. So that's coming out on October 31st. And again, science. We talk about Theosophy on Living Theosophy. I explain it as elementary as I can, because my mind, I mean, I'm not anywhere near as educated academically as you are, Edi, nor do I have as much experience as you have. I just explain it as divine science, divine knowledge, and through the application of these teachings to the best of my ability, simply to be better than I was the day before and just do my best. I have found that my life has improved in massive and monumental ways. So here on this channel, I just share my experience. I'm able to talk to beautiful people like you. It's science. So we're talking with you about science. And I know you've mentioned here about Theosophy science. And
Yes,
I wanted to see if we had some time to touch on that. I think that's very important.
Well, the Theosophy science movement was a huge thrust for many years. I mean, well over 60 years, and I was very privileged to know people like Arthur Ellison and Lester Smith, who was a fellow of the Royal Society, and Dr. Corona True, and many others in that movement. And sadly, that movement is practically run out of steam. So my first book was really an attempt to resurrect not Theosophy science, but to show that so many of the problems and conundrums in Western science, in materialistic science, are resolved, not solved, resolved through the ancient wisdom. And consciousness unfolding is, in a sense, continuing in that line, always emphasizing it's not a fight between the two. Each has its unique place, and each can learn a lot from the other. But Anne, can I just briefly touch on something we mentioned before, which is important?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
we mentioned the power of the mind. And what I regret is there's this, of course, as you well know, this huge movement in America where, oh, well, you just use your imagination and you chant and you get whatever you want. And the whole movement is totally corrupt, in my opinion. And the televangelists have got jets and private jets and they live in gated communities. Not at all. The most wonderful movement in America was Emerson and Ralph Waldo Trine and all those great people who talked about the power of the mind, but also the discipline in life that goes with it.
Yes.
It's not just I want to be rich and I'm going to use my mind in the stupid, naive way that is going around America, I'm afraid, if I can be blunt.
It's huge. It's over here. As a matter of fact, we're doing a little series on it, talking about it's much more. These abilities are much more than just these material gains.
Yeah.
This ability to be able to change our reality is not just for our gain and a red sports car, but it can be used for that. Just like you said, it can be used for good or bad, but it's much more, and it's very real. Do you
that's
believe?
The wrong use of it. That's the wrong
of
use.
course, it is being abused, and it's being misused, and it is corrupt. And it is also kind of, it stays in the space of the ego of, I want that, and that's all there is, because it's all about me. But what are your thoughts, if you were to say about this? It's called the law of attraction, the law of assumption, and they also call it the Kriya Shakti, is very similar as well. When they talk about this ability is very real, can be used for good or bad, by good or bad. What are your thoughts, and what are your feelings on actually accessing it?
Well, motive is all important.
Yes.
You know, if you are a consultant surgeon and you genuinely want to help people and your car's broken down, please, may I have a car? Perfectly right. But once you have a car, to say, please, may I have 20 Rolls Royces to show off? No.
Yes.
So motive is absolutely all important. Just as simple as that, it's motive.
The Secret coming out in 2006, which made it all about materialism, self-wealth, wealth for yourself, yachts, boats, cars, that it has been commercialized. And I believe that it's far more important that we take a look at this ability to help to ease the unnecessary suffering of all beings. Let's put it to work for, I mean, if you need to get something out of the way because you need something that's going to be, you can't help anybody if you don't have a house. You need that, that's fine. But then once you get that, let's get to work to help others. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, just what you said.
Okay.
Literally.
Well, it's motive.
Once you get things out of the way, then that is the right use of imagination and invocation.
Yes.
But also, as we all have realized, any progress on the spiritual path extracts a very heavy price also in the personal life.
Yes, it does. You want to expand on that a little bit, please? Tell us.
Definitely. One of the most important passages, or it's one page actually, in the esoteric writings, is called a warning. And it says that even a little attention to matters that are occult and esoteric will stir up a huge karmic wave, and therefore any tendencies you have will be magnified. So if you have selfish tendencies that you've managed to suppress by virtue of putting on a mask of politeness and civility, those selfish tendencies will inevitably break out. Equally, if you have altruistic, generous tendencies, they will be magnified 1,000-fold. So the beautiful passage that I remember is, once you've made the pledge, you have asked the divine light to be your witness and search out every corner of your being. And there is no turning back. You can't say, I made a promise and I'm now going to revoke it. Sorry. So you're given every chance to turn back before you make your promise. So this is why, in my opinion, in the Theosophical Society, amongst all sorts of other reasons, there's been such massive turbulence and conflict and dissension and acrimony in a society ostensibly dedicated to brotherhood. I think a lot of people should have chosen wisely and not put their foot on the path of occultism. And I'm being very presumptuous saying that.
Well, again, occultism, for a lot of people still, they come here, Eddie, they will hear the word occult and they immediately think dark arts. But again, I explain it in a way that it just means the hidden or the not revealed. How would you explain occult for those who?
The very word just means concealed. And I would say that it is a force in nature, and it is using the finest forces in nature. And I always use the example of nuclear power. that can power a station, to help a community or a city, or it can also be used to make atom bombs. You can use chemicals to administer a lethal drug to someone, or you can use chemicals for life-saving purposes. My next example, which always gets people with their jaws dropping, is look at human sexuality. Just look at it. The ugliness, the filth, the brutality. Has that anything to do with the loving and the beautiful use of sexuality? So
I
are you
understand.
trying to say that just because you see rapes and brutality and all of that, sexuality is evil? No.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, it's a very good analogy.
Occultism is a fine force in nature
Mm,
which has to be used with absolute ethic and discipline. And because it is such a powerful force, far more powerful than physical force, that's why you have all the training and all the discipline so that you can use the force wisely.
mhm. Well said. Very well
It
said.
has
And
nothing to do with witchcraft, but it can be used for witchcraft.
yes, yes. That's see, a lot of people we don't understand that, and automatically you get the spin and the la 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 and the
All of
ignorance.
that
We just
rubbish. Yes, I know. Yeah.
yeah, I know you know. You've been doing it for a
Yeah.
long time, and you know way more than most who's ever been on this channel. You were talking about the organizations that we certainly have at hand, and we have many organized religions. We have a lot of human ego involved, and control, and exclusivity, and dogma,
Mm,
and BS. And I think that what is here on Living Theosophy, there's no membership, no dues, no fees, no dogma. We're just students. We're just sharing
mm,
experience. You don't have to join, and I think that I think that that is important. The thing is,
mm,
brotherhood
mm,
means working along with everybody. It means
mm,
that we are one, and that there's still in organizations, including
mm.
the Theosophical Society, there is competition, there is exclusivity, there's refusal to work with others, and we're becoming the church if we're not careful. And so I know you were mentioning that you're certainly free to have the floor. I think this would be very a valuable time to discuss that. What are your thoughts on the future of the Theosophical Society, if you feel comfortable in sharing?
Well, yes, absolutely. Having been a whistleblower in the past,
Yes.
a lot of what I say may not be comfortable to a lot of people, but all I can say is I mean it sincerely, and I haven't just thought about it last week. I've thought about it for decades and decades. Of course, it's my feelings, but my considered feelings. The future of the Theosophical Society. I'm pessimistic, Anne, I'm afraid.
Hmm.
There is limitless future in Theosophy, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
the organization of the Theosophical Society, the leaders of the Theosophical Society, and I'm not afraid to qualify it, the way that um, a lot of sections have set up their own Church of Blavatsky, which is the last thing she ever wanted.
Yeah, the idolatry. I agree. I agree.
Now, just quickly talking about the leaders, I've thought a lot about this. There are two factors. No one should be president or in any office, let alone international president,
Mm,
beyond the time when you are effective. There is this completely ludicrous um, idea of reverence and worship where you must die in office. Well, if you just think of it very simply, that any leader who is declining will take a society down with his decline or her decline. So an unselfish leader would resign when the society is at its height and then hand over to someone to take it to a further height
mhm.
instead of taking the society to a height when you are highly effective, and then when you are not effective, dragging the society down with you. I know this won't wash with a lot of people, but it is selfish to be a leader when you are past your sell-by date.
Mhm.
You should hand over to someone who can be more effective. No one can last for 200 years. So to be president for 35 years,
Yeah.
national president for this, secretary for N years, is completely selfish. So that's the first thing. The next thing is there's too much emphasis on scholarship.
Mhm.
You know, if you find someone who knows the Mahabharata and the Gita by heart and the secret doctrine by heart, yeah, let's have him as a leader. Those are
Mhm.
not the qualities most important for a leader. A leader needs to have leadership. A leader must have a great feeling for humanity and for people as a whole. A leader does not have to be a scholar. In my experience over the last 6 years, and it has been a real eye opener working for Royal Navy projects and having majority of my colleagues from the Royal Navy and Armed Forces, is I've never seen more loyalty, discipline, and leadership amongst them. So if the Theosophical Society appointed its leaders from men of action, women of action, from the armed forces, from the educational institutions, even, if you like, from the great orchestras, even from the captains of industry, someone who knows how to lead, someone who knows about conflict resolution. As international president or national president, you don't need to know the Gita by heart. You need to know how to deal with people. You can appoint scholars. So lawyers, accountants are not the best leaders, huge generalization. They deal with the status quo. People in the armed forces, the men of action, are the ones who are the leaders.
Mhm.
So think of your leaders.
Well, I know that you had been in the Theosophical Society for a very long time and had to step down due to the way that you're looking at things. And I certainly understand. And I have my issues as well when I mention I'm not going to recruit. The promulgation, when it says we are to promulgate these teachings, which simply means to broadcast, share,
Mm,
spread. It's not to recruit, it is to share
mm.
these
It
teachings.
is to share.
And they have assured me that it's not about recruitment, but every time, since the name of this channel is Living Theosophy,
Mm,
anybody in the general world, when they come across the name Theosophy, they Google it, and Blavatsky's face comes up from the 19th century.
yeah, yeah,
And it is, they said, you're a cult. You are associated with Satanism,
yeah,
Luciferianism.
mm,
You have got the swastika, so you're all about the Nazis. And
yeah.
I'm thinking, and it's a nonstop. It is a nonstop drama,
Mm.
not just with that, with the outside world, because of the spin and the skew. That Blavatsky, by her own admission, says she's a scribe. I think she would be horrified, as you say, that there are statues of her and people having celebration on her birthdays. I've said this to my theosophical friends, and they don't understand why I don't want to celebrate the death day of William Q. Judge, but I
Mm.
just don't think it's important. I
Mm.
think it's important that we are in the now. The year is 2021. It is time for the new millennium. It's time for us to go ahead and appreciate the work that was done. These teachings have been written down throughout time.
Mm.
Blavatsky wrote down a large collection, but there is more work to do, and we're here to move forward, take that, apply it, become it, carry it forward out into the world without any, like we say, no distinguish of race, creed, sex, caste, or color.
Mm.
And if we're supposed to be brotherhood, we need to act that way. We need to start becoming these objectives and
Mm.
lose any dogma and elitism. I admire your bravery, and I appreciate you sharing that. What are your hopes for the future of the Theosophical Society? I know we might be
Well,
getting in a very
no,
interesting area.
my hope is for the Theosophical Society to break down materialism, which is, I think, the most important mission for the moment. And by materialism, let me be very clear, it's the attitude whereby the universe, all of us, are nothing but physical matter, started
Mhm.
after the Big Bang. Darwin explains everything, and there's nothing more to it. materialism is vital in its proper place. When you go to your dentist is not interested in your soul. I hope not. Your dentist is only interested in your material tooth. You are an object from the dentist's point of view.
Mhm.
So materialism is vital, but to equate the whole of consciousness and life as materialistic is just utterly nonsensical. So I would say the more the Theosophical Society can align itself with the scientific and medical network, which is doing wonderful work through the Galileo Commission in broadening the outreach and
Yes.
the
Yes.
expanse of science, I think that would be a good path to follow. But merely telling the world about Blavatsky is a total non-starter, because, as you
Mm.
rightly say, they will Google it and say, "Oh, load of rubbish," and forget it.
Yeah, they say it was
The way
started in the
to
19th
the way
century.
to introduce Blavatsky and others is to mention the teachings, and only
Mhm.
when their enthusiasm is roused, then you can float in the great teachers like Blavatsky. And equally, I would say I would put on the same pedestal as Blavatsky the great sages like Ramana Maharshi, Paul Brunton. I think Paul
Mhm.
Brunton's notebooks are indispensable for our current age. Manly
Mhm.
Hall's The Secret Teaching of
Yes.
the Ages is
Yes. Yes.
absolutely
Yes.
mine.
Yes, absolutely. They're all saying the same thing. Even the avatars through the ages, they said the
Mm,
same thing too.
mm,
Buddha, Krishna, Lao Tzu, Christ, they're all saying the same thing. We get it all mixed up. We like to divide. And now you see, even in theosophical circles, different groups saying they're not
yeah.
going to work with other groups, us and them. There is no us and them, period. There is no us and them in brotherhood.
Mm,
And to bring these teachings out into the world, it isn't just living theosophy. I'm just one. All of
mm,
us can do this. We share our experience through the application of these teachings. Try to share by what you've learned, and you're always learning more every day. And
mm,
these teachings belong to all of us. No one owns theosophy. And as Eddie just said, if you're watching and listen to what he said, it's not theosophy that needs to change. Theosophy stays the same. It's always been that way. It's eternal. And it's another name for these ancient teachings. It's just one name.
mm.
But it is the structure, the human structure is what he's talking about.
Yes,
Um,
it is the human structure. It's the vehicle. It's the vehicle.
mhm.
Mm.
Yes, that's very brave of you to stand up and say that here on this channel. I appreciate that.
I've
And
said it rather more loudly in the past, and
I know, but I know where you're coming from. I understand. And I remember when I joined again and I said, if I see any elitism or division, I'm going to step back out. I love, that you're doing what you're doing. But my main thing is this doesn't need to be talked about with theosophists to other theosophists. That's not important. It's not an academic thing about theosophists talking to other theosophists. That's
yeah.
kind of encapsulated. How are we going to take that out into the world if we're just talking to each other in this little thing? We've
Mm,
got to take this out to the people that are hungry for it, let them take it and run with it. And
mm,
off they go into the world to use these teachings as
mm,
an instruction manual on how to
mm,
live. I mean, you brilliantly described consciousness. You had some allegories that are just priceless as
mm.
you described this. Your work that you've done through the years. Thank you so much for sharing it so brilliantly with us tonight.
Thank you.
Hopefully, people will take something away from this with them so they can apply it and go, that ticked my box. I'm going to listen to some Mozart and then be quiet. And I'm going to be able to tap into my quiet space. Everybody has the ability to
Mm,
use your thoughts and your emotions and your imagination to be able to co-create the
mm,
world for those that are to come, to leave
mm.
this world a little better than when we got here by overcoming ourselves, because this is where it all takes place inside of us. What words would you give those who are watching about, like we talk about the great battle, about, oh, it's going to be when those people stop doing that or when that happens, but it's actually within us. And you talk about that in your book, about this, journey of the human. I always say Theosophy is all about you. How would you talk about that, about what is going on inside of us and what we're here to do as human beings? What is our responsibility? The
Well,
self-transformation.
the ultimate battle is not physical.
Yeah.
It expresses through the physical, obviously. It's too obvious to mention. The ultimate battle is spiritual,
Mhm.
and at this moment in time, I think there is a lot of turbulence how can I put it, on different levels. So the more it is supremely important to watch our thoughts, to watch our motives, and not get sucked in to all the nonsense that's flying around. But that needs great discernment, which is easy to say, of course.
So you would say when we talk about the spiritual battle, I guarantee you a lot of people that hear that will think of something taking place in the sky, supernatural beings on horseback, of clouds, of some kind of a spiritual battle. It's not what he's talking about. From what I understand, this is literally a constant battle between your higher and your lower self, your ego and your higher self. That's what I understand.
That is well put. Yes, it is the battle within each person. It's the old story of the two wolves, within you. Which wolf do you feed? The one that wants philanthropy and love and generosity, or do you want the wolf that wants cruelty and ego and power? But that said, and there is more to it than that. There are entities and there are energies that are not within our control, and it is not worth tuning in to that vibration because it can cause a lot of harm.
How would you describe them?
Well, let me put it very simply. The Apostle Paul talking, and it's not just words about. I think he used the word spiritual wickedness in high places. There are forces working through human beings that are working towards materialism and destruction, and of course the converse. And the three distinguishing characteristics are the following. And here Paul Brunton is wonderful in describing this, but in simple terms, the distinguishing characteristic of a negative force are these. The first is extreme brutality, easy. The second one is extreme sensuality, easily recognized. Now, the third one, beware. It is extreme cunning. It is high intellect. It is just intellect without feeling. It is cunning taken to an enormous degree. And these sort of people are very charming, very persuasive, very controlling. So it's the controlling, manipulative force around one that is an indicator of a negative influence to be aware of.
And you're saying that they're coming through man. These energies are working through man here on earth.
Through our thoughts. It is important, I think, to appreciate that these forces are entirely impersonal. They are personalized through us, through our being.
How can we protect ourselves or not access that? Is it through our thinking and behavior and where we're spending our energies?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Precisely.
Yes.
Through our thinking and behavior.
So pay attention to the thoughts and emotions. Yeah, because that's the creative force, is it not? Yeah. The consciousness we've been talking about all along.
Yeah.
Thank you, Edi Bilimoria. I could talk to you for hours. I am so grateful for you. I want you to know, everyone, again, the book is coming out on October 31st. It's a 3-volume, actually 4, because it has a glossary and an index, Consciousness Unfolding, A Journey Through Consciousness. And this is Edi Bilimoria coming out on October 31st. It'll be available at bookstores worldwide, including Watkins in London and other favorite bookstores. And again, it's actually right now at the publishers getting ready for launch. This has been years in the making. And Edi has been, again, a theosophist for decades. And he is a very passionate, beautiful soul. He's highly educated. I called him Dr. Edi Bilimoria but there's a PhD's behind his name. It's like, there's not enough space. I was going to run out of ink. It's very impressive, the life that he's packed into these few years on the planet, and that we've been able to have time with him. And the music, I wanted to talk a little bit more. Perhaps we have a minute, if I can keep you a minute more, just to talk about the Song of the Spheres. As you being a musician and a pianist that is passionate about the beauty and the essentialness of this mathematical music, it is harmony. Can you explain your understanding of the Song of the Spheres as we close, please, Edi?
The Song of the Spheres. Well,
or the music of the spheres,
well,
whichever
that's
one.
the harmony, the proportion, the rhythm, the harmony, and the beauty that is unseen and invisible, and which the great composers have drawn down and given it to us in our world of space and time.
That's the best way ever. Thank you. I wish I could hug you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your beautiful energy, your own music, and your words of wisdom and experience. And we just appreciate you. Please keep an eye out for more from Edi Bilimoria. He's always speaking all over the world. And we love you. If there's anything we can ever do for you here, Edi, you're always welcome.
Yeah.
You are such a gift. Thank you. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video. We appreciate you. If you would please like, subscribe, and share. It helps the algorithm to reach more people. We love you.